Hi everyone, Mike from FisherMn, and it's cleaning day. We got a little bit of clouds in the sky. Not the best day for fishing. It rained earlier. So I thought, you know what? Every once in a while you got to get the vehicle cleaned out for the next fishing trip. So I kind of took everything out, got the old vacuum out, and look at that. It's looking good. Now, one thing I did want to point out was my rod storage system. I think it's kind of unique to my vehicle because it's custom made by the guy that I make custom rods with. So that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you how I store the rods, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the fishing rods that I use. This is a St. Croix Legend Extreme medium fast action rod, and if you've seen some of my smallmouth videos from the Rum River, this is generally my smallmouth rod. I like throwing the wrapless skitter props with these. I wanted to point out the guides. So take a look at how they're connected. You got the orange, the blue, and kind of a teal color. That's all thread. And so what you do, if you're not familiar with rod building, is you wrap the thread around the bottom of the guide, and then you put an epoxy coat over it. A flex coat is what it's called. And that turns on a turner overnight under heat lamps, and by the time it's done, it has adhered to the thread. Now, a lot of people think that the epoxy holds the guide to the rod, but actually the guide is held by the thread. If I were to take a razor blade and chip off that epoxy and cut the thread, that guide would come off just like it was never even connected to the rod. A pretty cool process for sure, and I'm so lucky to have a buddy like Wayne who has all the equipment to do it just right. When you look at the bottom part here, it's mostly decorative. So there is one functional thing. There's a hook keeper that we put in down here, but that's kind of the fun part about rod building. You can decide what you want to put on your rod. And this is actually a little fish pattern. If you can see the orange eye and then the blue fins. And this is about 135 pieces of thread interwoven around the bottom of the rod. So a pro like my buddy Wayne can probably knock it out in about an hour. For me, it takes 3 to 4 hours to do the pattern, and many calls to Wayne to ask him which way the thread goes next. but it's kind of a fun project in the winter here in Minnesota when all the lakes are frozen. Looking down on the handle, this is another nice part of rod building. You can custom make the handle to exactly how you want it. So I preferred just a little bit bigger section up top here to hold on to, and then the bottom I made a little thinner. This is the first part that's done when you're building a rod, is you put the handle on. My buddy Wayne has a drill set up. We connect the drill to the back of the rod blank and it spins, and then we use different grits of sandpaper to get the handle, the cork, formed just like we want to. Before being able to sand the cork, you have to put it on the rod, and cork is put on in sections. So if you look really close, you have the different rings of cork. Interestingly enough, besides buying the blank, the cork is one of the more expensive parts of the rod. So once we glue the cork on and glue the reel seat on, this one has Wayne's custom fancy hidden reel seat. Then we put it on a makeshift lathe with his drill, and we sand that cork down. Another thing I want to mention about the guides is you can pick out what kind of guides you like to use. And for this rod, I picked out recoil guides. If you're not familiar with recoil, they're a titanium alloy, and you could bend them all the way to the rod blank and they'll come right back to where they were. Now if you're a rod builder or a rod builder who's just starting to think about what materials to use, these are great guides. They're nice and durable. They also, I feel like, give you an extra little cushion when you're fighting the fish because they have a little bit of flexibility in them. The only complaint that people have about these recoil guides, and St. Croix actually stopped using them on their rod blanks, is when you cast, it makes kind of a hissing sound, or when you reel. So you might notice some of my videos on the Rum River with these, you can hear that hissing. So if you're kind of sensitive to sound, you might think about a different kind of guide. I thought I'd give you a sample of what the rod building process looks like. If you're more interested, put it in the comments. Maybe I'll do a full video on how to make a fishing rod. Now that you have a nice rod, what do? You got to store it. So here's what our solution was for storing the fishing rod. Okay, so I removed the rod storage rack that my buddy Wayne made for me. So Wayne and I build rods together, and he's a pretty amazing builder just in general. And so after we got done building a couple of rods one year, he goes, gotta have a good place to store it. So I said, okay, what do we do? Well, Wayne goes and gets this old piece of plywood out of his garage, just a big old square, and he gets to work. He starts measuring. He started looking at the back section of my vehicle, and we found these slots here and thought that would be a good spot to have an anchor point for the rack. So he does all the measurements, he starts cutting. I don't know, I think I was holding the flashlight. Within about a day, he comes up with this awesome storage system for storing my rods. Now I will say, my one contribution was I found this at Home Depot. It's just made for brooms, but boy does it store the rods nice. And the nice thing is these can slide back and forth, and you can clip the rods in on the end there. So I guess that's my contribution to the whole project. It was nice enough that Wayne took the time and made it out of just a piece of wood, but then he said, if you find me some marine carpet, I'll cover it so it looks a little nicer in your vehicle. So Wayne, thanks man, this is an awesome system. Let's bring it over to the car and see what it looks like to put it in. This section angles in, and underneath these little inserts go right into the part that was originally made for the car seat. And this one, we will just slide it right back. It drops right in, and look at that, you got a flat shelf to store your rods. So the rods just go straight in all the way to the front section. I'll show you another insert that he made to help out up there. and I can store 4 rods with no problem. Get our last 2 rods in here. And they could go all the way up front, so you could conceivably get about a 7.5, 8 foot rod in here. The clips are nice because they hold the handles nice and snug. Some of the handles that aren't cork may kind of wear on them a little bit, but this is 3 years worth of using this and I haven't seen too much damage. Holds them nice and secure. If you need to just adjust them based on the kind of reel that you have, you can turn the reels so they're to the side. Just an awesome way to store the rods. So now let me show you the front part. Originally I had said, well, they can just sit right on the seat, but he fashioned another piece of wood here that lets the rods rest so that they're nice and straight. Very nice system for the rods. So one of the reasons I just wanted to show you how I stored my rods, but another thing I was thinking of is no matter what kind of car you have, think about how versatile PVC is. This part here could be mounted on a PVC pipe, and you could do something similar just by putting PVC from one side of your car to the other with whatever you have to attach it with. So I'll be interested to see if any of you come up with some ideas about using, maybe, I think these are like broom holders. I'll have it on the screen how much it was and where you can find it. I think Home Depot's got them, but a pretty cheap and easy kind of do-it-yourself way to hold the rods. If you're like me, I didn't like putting them all the way straight through my car because it's like your arm was always on them up in the middle. Of course, if you're traveling with someone, you might need a little different system. What I've done sometimes is I can angle the rods. I hang a line across the 2 handles from there to there, and then you can have the rods kind of sitting right in the middle. You can even make it low so it's not in your rear view mirror, and then you can have a passenger with you. So I think it's nice, especially if you've invested in some nice rods, to have them up and out of your way. An added benefit of this platform here is it usually ends up getting filled with stuff. A lot of times what I'll do after a day on the water, the gloves that you wear get kind of wet, so I'll just put them out here to dry, and that seems to do the trick. Got a few pairs there. Kind of nice, and I have all this room to store whatever else I need. So there you have it. I'll call it Wayne's rod system. I think if you get ingenious, you can use some PVC and one of these holders, and you might be able to get your rods up and out of your way also. I appreciate you taking a look at this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps out the channel. Thanks so much for watching.